everybody, and welcome to the Commander Pod, your Magic the Gathering podcast for all things Commander. My name is Keltson.
And I'm Spencer Simpson. We are so excited to be back to you live this week after 2 weeks of pre-recorded deck techs because Keltson is back in town from vacation. And Keltson, a lot happened while you were gone. They unbanned a bunch of stuff and also marked a lot of things as game changers. So you're not allowed to play them in your bracket 2 decks anymore.
Yeah, as I'm still trying to figure out what a bracket 2 deck really is, but it was kind of weird to be like disconnected from that conversation that was going on, but maybe also really good. Maybe I missed like some of the drama of whatever happened.
Yeah, I think the biggest drama that you missed was me just like sweating over trying to get my hands on a Gifts Ungiven that I had in my cart before the announcements happened, and I didn't check out because I didn't know if I wanted to pay $1 shipping and couldn't find any other cards to get me over the shipping threshold. And I've since learned my lesson. If I want a card and I think it's going to get unbanned, that I should probably just
that $1 is less than
20. Yeah, sure. Than what it'll balloon to after it gets unbanned.
Oh, that's funny. Well,
yeah,
good.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm glad that there hasn't been too much drama about it. I've read a lot of articles. I've listened to a lot of podcasts, watched a lot of videos about people's reactions to these changes. And I think like in general, people feel good about what went down. So I'm excited to talk about it. I haven't really gotten to talk through it with anyone yet. So I'm excited for us to have this episode to do just that.
Yeah, I think today is going to be just a little bit of an info dump about our thoughts on what things have been unbanned, what things we want to see be unbanned. So
sure.
For those who are less aware of what has happened, the Commander Committee, the Wizards of
Commander
the Coast
Format
official
Panel,
Commander Format Committee panel of judges has decided they made an announcement on April 22nd that was an update to the brackets system. And update to the bracket system. And really, I did air quotes for those listening on non-video platforms because it was primarily an update to the ban list and game changers list. The larger change that they're planning on doing to actually update the bracket system, they're planning on making in the future, though they did allude to some of those changes they might make and some things they wanted to re-emphasize about the bracket system. And we're going to talk about some of that. Starting with the game changers, which was the primary change.
And they said that I think that there won't be any changes to the bracket system for the rest of this year, that they'll address that next year, and that there won't be any more unbannings for the rest of this year. So we'll have to wait till next year for any additional unbannings.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, I thought they were only doing the no more bannings or unbannings this year. I didn't realize that there was no changes to the bracket system entirely this year.
I thought so. Maybe that's not right, though.
It could be.
I'll have to go back and read the article.
Nobody get your hopes up. We're stuck with what we got for now. Though it is pretty good, and I think they were able to talk about some of the things that were at least mention, call to attention some of the things that were our biggest gripes with the bracket system. But let's start out with talking about the game changers list and the unbans, because that was that took like a lion's share of the spotlight from what the changes they made.
Definitely. We're a little late in the news cycle, so I know a lot of you have probably looked at these. So we're not going to read through each card each card, but we'll read through the list of cards so that you know what's going on. So there were 5 unbans, and they were Gifts Ungiven, Sway of the Stars, Braid's Cabal Minion, Coalition Victory, and Panoptic Mirror. Mm-hmm. I don't know that there were any of these. So Coalition Victory, I think like it was pretty clear that one was going to get unbanned. It seemed like a lot of conversation. Gavin mentioned that it probably would get unbanned. I think that's probably the only one I expected really off of this list to like be part of the first round of unbannings.
Yeah, I had heard talk about Gifts Ungiven because Intuition is already unbanned, which is virtually Gifts Ungiven.
Sure.
And so I think that's what I was expecting, hence why I literally had it in my cart before the announcement happened.
Yeah.
And I'd heard some chatter about it as well. The rest of these I wasn't like, they felt a little bit random to me. Like Sway of the Stars and Panoptic Mirror, like felt like maybe they made a list of things that were okay to unban and like put them on a dartboard or something. Like, do you know what I mean? Like it didn't seem like it was exactly like I don't know, they weren't on my list at all for things that I was like, oh, this needs to be unbanned, or, you know.
Yeah. It was only on my list because about a year ago I went through and bought pretty much all of the cards off of the ban list that were reasonably priced, so that I would have them in case they ever got unbanned. Because I've been of the opinion for a long time that we should unban most everything and just let playgroups figure out what play experiences they want to have. Like it's a card game. I think people should be able to play with their cards if they want to. I realize that like it makes it harder for people playing at an LGS or at a convention or whatever. But I think that the bracket system and the game changer list is supposed to kind of help facilitate that. So I am glad that like cards that were seen as an issue, we're going to start to have opportunities to play with them because they are to some extent like restricted to certain types of play or brackets of play. And I think that's awesome. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, I think unbanning more things would instill the idea that they have more trust in the player base to like police themselves, and clearly we're not like exactly deserving of that as a player base because of how like
because Golos is still banned,
or because last year out of nowhere Nadu, Dockside,
Sure.
Mana Crypt, and Jewel Lotus all got banned. You know what I mean? But like I think like we talked about earlier today, balance, like which I think is I am now convinced is such a cool card and I think can be unbanned because I see the potential for it to be like a good check on like landfall decks because like Vandal Blast exists, which just will punish artifact based ramp or whatever, right? So like this could be like a good counteraction to that. But you made the point that like you can abuse balance and like sack all your lands to Zuran Orb.
Yeah.
Cast balance. But I think like and they've mentioned as much that they think it's unlikely to get banned or unbanned. But that one to me is like one of the most illustrative of your point, which is play this at higher powers, put it on the game changer list. And then if you're building a lower power deck, like this isn't something that goes in your lower power deck. This is something that goes in a higher power control list to like wipe all the creatures off the board. Or even like, I guess in a bracket 3 deck, it can be like one of your board wipes as long as you're not putting a Zuran Orb in your deck with the intent of just like, you know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, I do think that like balance when used at its most powerful becomes mass land denial.
Sure.
And knowing that, then you would only ever see it at bracket 4. If that was the case, if it was considered mass land denial, you'd only ever see it at bracket 4. And in bracket 4, you should be able to play pretty much anything. I think people should be prepared for a balance. It's very easy to counter. Like there's lots of ways to take care of balance and not have it totally blow you out in a bracket 4 play
environment. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I also think there's like something to be said about like Vandal Blast being a thing to deal with like artifact ramp and like powerful artifacts and stuff.
Sure. I mean, I think more than that, like look at Farewell. Like I think Farewell is probably closer to balance than Vandal Blast is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean as a way to like I know mass land destruction sucks, but like land ramp is like out of control and balance seems like actually one of the tamest ways to keep like land ramp in check if you're not specifically ramping lands. Does that make sense? I feel like
I think so.
Or at least like there could be things like that like I don't know.
I think you're right. Like I said, I'm on the unban balance bandwagon. So
unban everything.
You're preaching to the choir
let people
here.
play with stuff. Yeah, except for Hull Breacher, right? You're telling me.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. Like I as much as I'd like to unban virtually everything, I understand that there are some things that really just do not lend to a good play experience in Commander. And I have a couple copies of Hull Breacher because I would like it to be unbanned and I want to play with the card because I think it's really cool. I recently built a Vintage Cube deck that's probably one of the best Hull Breacher decks I've ever played. And I now understand why it cannot be unbanned in Commander. Because like most of the cards that it was playing are not cards that are banned in Commander. I mean, it's like it looked like a constructed Hull Breacher deck. Yeah. And it played like a constructed Hull Breacher deck to the point where like I apologize to my Vintage Cube play group. Like it wasn't fun for them.
Right.
And I feel like it takes a lot to make Vintage Cube unfun. So
Yeah, Channel and
it was a good
Emrakul
experience.
exist. Like people
Yeah.
play that deck, and
Yeah.
but yeah,
Watching someone scoop after my like third consecutive wheel in a single turn just like wasn't. I mean, I would do it again. I would build that deck in a heartbeat. It was so good. It was so much fun, and I love Whole Breacher so much. But it's like Vintage Cube is just such a different environment than Commander.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it's there's a difference between like someone dropping I mean, we're talking about Vintage Cube right now, but someone dropping like Channel and then Emrakul and being like, okay, you got me, and someone saying, okay, Whole Breacher wheel, and then if they don't find anything or whatever, then like you're just you have a single card in hand. Like that feels just like entirely different to me, at least in terms of play experience. And that feels even worse when it's you and 3 people. Like I've played Narset one time and then took Narset out of every single deck that Narset Parter Avails, the one that prevents people from drawing. And I was like, oh, this sucks. Like this is.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the crazy thing about Whole Breacher is just that it rebates you like a bunch of treasures. So like in Commander, so in 1v1, I was making 7 treasures every time I wheeled. And so I would just net 7 new mana, and I would usually wheel into another wheel, and then I could just do it again and net more mana, and then just like keep doing it until I found 4th Aerlingus, and then cast a huge 4th and win, right? But in Commander, you're making like 21 treasures, and then you can just keep doing it, right? So it's just like it's so wrong for Commander. As much as I want that card unbanned, like I cannot conceive. Same thing with like Tolarian Academy. Like Tolarian Academy, I think is such a cool card. I want to play it so badly, and I just don't know that it could ever get unbanned.
Yeah,
I mean, like it's restricted in Vintage. Like it's so busted.
Yeah, it is just like a different play environment where it's multiple people, and some things just will be busted to the point that they're like unfair. Like, and not that like we're always trying to play fair Magic. Like clearly, when you're playing CEDH, you're not trying to play fair necessarily. Like you're trying to win as efficiently as possible. But like unfun, I guess, is like it's, I don't know. Yeah, just like wholly too powerful, so they need to be. So, anyways, we wish everything would be unbanned. They only unbanned 5 things, and
I think these are cool unbans. I'm probably only ever going to play Gifts Ungiven.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I had never thought about Panoptic Mirror. I forgot that was a card that was banned. Same with Sway of the Stars. The only Gifts Ungiven, Coalition Victory, and Braids Cabal Mini were the only ones that I remember being on the ban list to begin with. So, in addition to unbans, some things were taken off of the Game Changers list, and these both kind of surprised me a little bit. One of them is Trinisphere, and the other is Trouble in Pairs. And I'm actually kind of happy Trouble in Pairs came off.
Me too.
I think, though it is like some of the best white card draw, but is also some of like the only best white card draw, I guess.
Yeah, because like what's the next best thing? It's like Mangara, the Diplomat. And that's like a pretty steep cliff.
Yeah, because what Trouble in Pairs is like Mangara plus what's the it's Mangara plus what's his name? The Fairy Mastermind, like stapled together or whatever.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's incredibly good. And I think I don't know if I understand exactly why it came off. I'm happy. I think I'm happy it did. I don't know. I don't know. The other one being Trinisphere.
I'm also not sure because people were making the comparison of Trouble in Pairs with like Ristic Study, and they're like, well, yeah, Trouble in Pairs is good, but it's no Ristic Study. And I was like, okay, but like you can play around Ristic Study. Like,
sure.
What are you gonna do? Play around Trouble in Pairs by not casting spells and not attacking and not,
not drawing cards.
Like, that's ridiculous. So I don't know. I think it's still very powerful. But I'm happy it's unbanned that it's unrestricted.
Yeah, not on the Game Changers list.
Yeah, because I do think that like just white decks, especially mono white decks, really do need it.
Yeah,
it's good.
I think it's interesting because it feels like the opposite of the argument for a card that got put into the Game Changers list, which is Deflecting Swat. Which you were telling me that you listened to a Command Zone episode, and they were mentioning that it's one of the only like protection or interaction spells that Red has.
Yeah, which I think I agree with.
Yeah, but that's kind of the opposite argument, right? Where like, well, it is the same argument, but one got put on, one got taken off, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. I'm in the camp. So things that got game changerized. Should we just like blast through this list? 'Cause
Yeah,
it's
go
kinda
through
long.
those.
So we've got Teferi's Protection and Humility are the white cards that got put on the list. I always think balance when I read Humility, and I like double
Oh,
take.
sure. Humility is the one that makes everything 1/1s and loses all abilities.
Yeah. It's like sudden spoiling, but permanent, but forever. In blue, Narset Parter Veils, Intuition, Consecrated Sphinx got put on the Game Changer list. In black, Necropotence, which probably belongs on there for sure, and Orcish Bowmasters got put on the Game Changers list. And then in red, we have Deflecting Swat and Gamble that got put on the list, so a tutor and a free interaction spell. And then in green, we have Worldly Tutor, Crop Rotation, Natural Order, and Food Chain that got put on the Game Changers list. I think green...
and Seedborn Muse.
Oh, and Seaburn Muse. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Totally skipped. Yeah, 5 cards got put on the Game Changers list.
Was that just coping?
That was
coping?
fully just like, it's not on the list. Nope, it's not on the list. And then multicolor cards, we have Notion Thief and Aura Shards that got put on the list. And then for lands, we have Field of the Dead and Mishra's Workshop. And I think we want to talk about a couple of these that surprised us or that like we think belong in here. I added my own little 2 cents about Necropotence. It's so good. That for sure is a game changer, right?
Yeah, I think so too. I think I was surprised that wasn't on the first list. I think like notably, I mean, there's some things on here that surprised me that I don't think should be on here personally. But I'm surprised not to see Mana Drain on this list.
Yes.
And I just want to know, am I just like overly worried about Mana Drain? Or is it the right power level? Because like when it was one of the cards they talked about in the article where they were like, yeah, we looked at Mana Drain, but like it's not that bad. And I was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, so here's my honest thoughts. I've been thinking about this too. I think I have been a little bit primed to think about Mana Drain as very powerful because when we were first working on our power levels, we were consuming so much content around like power level and like game-changing stuff. And we watched a Command Zone episode where they mentioned Mana Drain as like, we only play this in our most powerful decks, like with like Jeska's Will as like one of the most powerful cards.
Sure.
And like Ad Nauseum or whatever. Like they like listed it in the group of those because they're like, it's so good. It's a strictly better counterspell.
Jeska's Will is a game changer.
Jeska's Will is a game changer. I think Ad Nauseum is also a game changer, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, is it? It might be. Is that just for CEDH purposes? Yeah, it is a game changer.
It is a game changer. Yeah. I mean, it just is like a mass draw spell, I suppose.
Like Necropotence. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think I've been conditioned to think about it as very powerful because of my impressions from then. And so I was really trying to challenge that recently when we were talking about this, and I still think it's just really good.
Yeah,
like,
I think it is too.
I think it's just insane. Like
I thought you were going to come around on that and tell me why it shouldn't be.
No, I just think it's very good. And what was funny to me is their justification was like, this is something that's like pretty good in the late game and then gives you like a single burst of mana and then it's like you're fine. And I was like, no, this is something you cast on turn 3 to counter somebody's 4 mana spell, and then you cast a 7 mana spell on your turn, and it's not like Dark Ritual or Cabal Ritual or Seething Song where like I got a burst of mana. It's like you don't have something and now I do have something.
Yeah.
It's so insane. It's so good.
I just have to imagine that in like we'll ignore bracket 1 as exhibition because that's like trying to do something else, but Mana Drain has to be a huge feel bad in bracket 2.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I cast a Mana Drain once in our play group when we were in our stupid arms race, and I countered someone's 6 mana spell, and they're like, okay, and I was like, sorry, like I just like it just felt so bad in something that might have already been a power level mismatch to begin with, but even if it's not, like, how bad does that feel?
I do think that like personally, I will not put this in a bracket 2 deck. No. and it's sweet that it doesn't count towards my game changers in a bracket 3 deck. Like
Yeah.
I'll put it in bracket 3 decks, but I do not think I will put Mana Drain in a bracket 2 deck.
But even so, I think I'd be pretty judicious about the
Yeah.
bracket 3 decks I want to put it in. I think I have to like. So
It is. I think that the play pattern that you outlined really exhibits how Mana Drain maybe should be played, where it is like you hit someone's commander after they've ramped,
Yeah.
and it completely shuts down their game plan, and it propels you so far ahead on
Yes.
resources the next turn. And that is a salt-inducing play. Like
100%.
it is such a feel bad to have your commander countered in that way. But why would you play Mana Drain any other way? Because that is the right time of the game to get that burst of mana, and that's probably one of the best targets for you to hit.
Yeah, I think it's the problem, right? Is like counterspell even, which doesn't give you the mana, obviously, but it does counter something. That is my logic for a counterspell. Any other counterspell is save this for a more relevant threat. Like I'm
Yes,
not just going to counter someone's
exactly.
commander,
Yep.
but because Mana Drain is
A ritual?
you get mana from this, it's
Yeah.
like fired off at the first thing that's big enough.
Yeah, I think so. I think that like in order to be taken advantage of the most, it is a different play pattern than other counter spells.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think you're right, and I think that's what makes it different, and that's why I think it does belong.
I think it belongs in the game changer list for sure. I think that is a miss. I think they should have included it in the game changers list.
Yeah.
The other one that I think needs to be on this list is Deadly Rollick. And I know we just talked about potentially taking Deflecting Swat off, but I'll tell you why I think Deadly Rollick and Deflecting Swat belong on here. It's because in a bracket 2 game, I don't expect anyone to be able to interact with me with no mana available with 0 downside. Like there
Yeah.
are things that you can do, like even the flares. I'd be like, okay, sick. Like you got me. Flare of duplication, flare of denial, whatever.
Yeah, you sacked your creature.
You had to sack your creature for it. Like that would not bother me if someone was like in a bracket 2 deck was like Fierce Guardianship, or I was like, I'm gonna cast Peer into the Abyss, targeting myself, and they're like Deflecting Swat. Now it's me. I would be like, what the crap? Like I thought we were playing a.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I think I alluded earlier in the episode that I'm still trying to figure out what a bracket 2 deck is. And there was some language in the article, and I think we have it in our outline here to talk about it a little later, that the language around precons was a mistake in bracket 2. And that they're likely going to revise that. And so that's something that we talked about in a previous episode, and so that made me feel much better about it. But I think one of the best descriptions that I've heard of brackets 2, 3, and 4 was from a recent Command Zone episode where Rachel Weeks was just like explaining those 3 brackets. The bracket 2 is like incremental telegraphed wins, where like you see the board state building and you know at which point you're in trouble and you're probably going to lose. And there's like not a ton of surprises, right? Because even with like something like a Crater Hoof Behemoth, which is like a huge finisher and kind of comes out of nowhere, it doesn't do anything if you don't have a board. Like there is still like a point at which you're like, wow, they're really amassing a lot of advantage and they have a lot of mana. Something could happen. Bracket 3 has the ability to just kind of like win on the spot or like quote unquote out of nowhere. And then bracket 4 is just about speed, like doing that, but with the most speed possible. And to me, that like made a lot of sense. That really helped me understand, and helps me understand your thinking around Deflecting Swat and Deadly Rollick. Those are not telegraphed incremental plays. Like the telegraphed play is you're tapped out. I am safe to do something. And being able to play like no downside free spells definitely is not in line with that play style. So I think I understand that, and I think that is a good argument as to why these could be on the game changer list.
Yeah, absolutely. And like there are other things. Like someone could feasibly play like a Force of Negation or whatever, or like a Pact of Negation, and like
Sure.
at some point we have to draw the line, and there has to be like a judgment call of like, does this belong in bracket? Like, should I be playing this in a deck that I intend to play at bracket 2? And then like the answer is probably no. But I think that line should be after the free command spells. I think we should draw the line in the sand there. And I think that's another thing we want to talk about. Like I just mentioned intent. I think that's something that they had mentioned in their articles as something they want to draw the focus to for the brackets. I do want to talk about that. I want to talk really quickly about one card that I was really surprised to see on this list.
Okay.
And it's crop rotation.
Yeah.
This
I was
one,
very surprised to see.
I was so surprised.
There were
by
several that I was like surprised to see, but this one most of all, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a land tutor. It just like it goes against you land. I use crop rotation as a ritual in my casual Tassiger deck to go to sack a land, get a fetch for another land, and then I can delve 3 cards away. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think their reasoning behind it I thought was very interesting because they talked about it in conjunction with Worldly Tutor and Gamble as the cards they were banning. And it was about tutors specifically. And I thought, as I've thought about it since, I realized that crop rotation is it's one of the most efficient tutors. It can get any land, and you are often getting like potentially getting like a combo piece with it, which is the reason why tutors often are like kind of like spooky. Though in lower powers maybe you're not. They had mentioned they're wanting to think about tutors maybe differently and revising the notes around tutors in the brackets, which I appreciate because that's one of our critiques as well, is like potentially segmenting the Game Changers list into like different types, categories, even if it's like tutors and other, because initially they didn't include Worldly Tutor, and we thought they should, and maybe they didn't because they need to draw a line somewhere, and maybe that line is different. Like, if you take tutors out of the equation, you don't have to put them in a list with other cards in terms of their game changer ability. That you just put them in their own category, and then it's like separate measures of how much they can alter a game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see how they decide to handle tutors moving forward. I think one of the things that really surprised me the most about crop rotation was that a lot of the most egregious lands that you might be searching for are already on the Game Changer list. And so, like, if you're going to run the full lands package plus crop rotation, you're already in bracket 4. That's too many Game Changers. So,
yeah, right.
like, I feel like it, like, does kind of nerf landfall decks to a degree, because crop rotation is also just good for landfall decks to sack land, get a fetch, sack the fetch, get another land. Like, it works really well for what it does, and it's a really cool card. I can see how it could get abused. I also could see how it just gets more powerful over time as they print better and better utility lands. Like, we have Talon Gates of Madara now, which turns crop rotation into a protection spell, which is really cool. So I can see how it could get out of hand. If I had to put money on it, I'd guess this comes back off the Game Changers list.
Yeah, that's my guess too, because like I understand that we might get more utility lands, and this like gets you any land you want out of your deck. But like Talon Gates is not that impactful. Like,
no.
Do you know what I mean? It's like at that point, like, put Slip Out the Back on like, you know what I mean, on the Game Changers list, because that's doing the same thing as like tutoring for this land. I think I'm thinking of like the most egregious thing you could be doing, and it would be like completing your Dark Depths comp. Like, most egregious thing you could be doing without dipping
I actually
into the
don't
Game
think
Changers
the Depths combo is even that good in Commander anymore. Like,
no,
I'm not even
you
worried about that.
You just bounce it or whatever, and you're fine.
Yeah, but it's like Gaia's Cradle, which is on the Game Changer list.
Yeah.
Or like, sure, they put Field of the Dead on. I also don't think that needs to be on the list. But like Field of the Dead, I know a lot of people are worried about that card. Or like Glacial Chasm. Guess what? That one's also a Game Changer. So it's like, just put the lands that are a problem on the Game Changer list, I guess.
Yeah.
and just like let people use crop rotation as like a really good toolbox piece for lands decks.
Yeah, I like, if I were to think of the most egregious thing you could be doing, and please correct, like you boys and girls out there that are playing landfall decks or playing decks that like are doing crazy stuff with crop rotation tell me. But like in my brief racking of my brain, you could go get the other part of like a Urborg Cabal Coffers combo or whatever, or you like go get Yavi Maya, and now all of your Forest Walkers can like swing at anybody. But like,
sure,
you know, like that.
I'm just still not that worried about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's me either. So that is the one that surprised me. I think the most. Though most of these, I'm like, yeah, like even Seaborn Muse. Like I was kind of sad to see go on the list, and I was also like, yeah, it's like. Seaborn Muse hits, and it's pretty darn impactful.
So one thing, I think I maybe feel the opposite way about like Consecrated Sphinx, where like I used to think that card was really powerful. I don't think it's that powerful anymore. I don't think it should be on here. But Seaborn Muse is probably the opposite, where I don't think I realized how powerful it was, and now that it's on here, I'm like, oh yeah, that's cracked.
Yeah,
and it should be on here.
Yeah.
But one thing that the Game Changer list and the unbannings has really made me think about is that, in a positive way, is that I really appreciate the Game Changer list and that it encourages people to play cards, which may feel counterintuitive because like this is restricting play to certain brackets of play. But what I mean by that is, let's talk about Mana Drain since we just talked about that.
Sure.
I currently have Mana Drain in I think 1 or 2 decks. And it's because I'm worried about it. I'm worried about how strong it is. Even though I could right now, because it's not a game changer, be playing it in any deck. I don't. Because I'm worried about it. And some of these other cards that I've been worried about, like Seedborn Muse to a degree, like I have Seedborn Muse and I don't play it in that many decks because I'm like worried, like at which point is it like too powerful? Guess what? I don't have to worry about that anymore because like it is on the Game Changer list. And so if I want to put it in a deck, it takes up a Game Changer slot. And same thing with like other cards, whether I have those cards or they're cards I've wanted to proxy, but like cards like Smothering Tithe, Cyclonic Rift, Fierce Guardianship, Gaia's Cradle, like all these powerful cards that I haven't been putting in decks because I'm too worried about the play experience. I now feel like I have more license to play those cool cards because there is some sort of structure as to when it's socially acceptable to be playing those cards.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think like it does. It gives you the license to play those cards, and you don't have to feel bad about it.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because it is now one of 3 potential threats versus one of like a bunch of potential, if that makes
of who knows how many potential
who knows
threats.
how many, right?
Yeah.
So like if I have an Assassin's Trophy and you're like, or I have or whatever, and you're like trying to loop Glacial Chasm, then I can try to get rid of your Glacial Chasm and exile your graveyard, and I don't also have to worry about Rhystic Study and Cyclonic Rift and Smothering Tithe and you know what I mean?
Fierce Guardianship and
Fierce Guardianship. Yeah, exactly. Like I can deal with one of those threats and be like, phew, I've gotten rid of one of the things that is like the most annoying to deal with and the most game altering, and now can potentially, you know, deal with whatever else is coming. But in addition to it not being like a social taboo of like playing an overpowered spell in your deck that is supposed to be at a certain bracket level, because like right now we're so wishy-washy about that, about like even like I was thinking about my Garth deck and I had talked about it being bracket 2, and I don't know where it falls in the brackets because it's playing no game changers. And in this new world of maybe precons aren't going to be in bracket 2, potentially, who knows, it could be a bracket 2. And then I was thinking, okay, if I wanted to make this a bracket 3 deck, like how many, if I just right now swapped out 3 cards for 3 game changers, would I feel like this is probably a bracket 3 deck? And I think my answer was mostly yes. And then that's like also like super freeing to be like, oh, I like it's not going to jump me up a whole echelon to try to make this bracket 3. I can make some of these swaps. It was playing Seedborn Muse, and I took Seedborn Muse out because I was like, oh, I want this to not have any game changers. And I kind of had to challenge myself of like, why don't I want this to have game changers? Why do I want this to be bracket 2? Maybe it just wants to be at a 3, and I can just like maybe instead of taking Seedborn Muse out, I put in Cyclonic Rift and just like
put in 2 more game changers.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. I really hope that between the Game Changers list and the unbannings and hopefully future unbannings, people just play their cards more. And
Yeah.
people feel like they can play their cards more. That's like really my hope. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. And feel comfortable doing so, right?
Yes.
Like I think that's the big thing.
You don't
is
have
that
to
it-
worry if your Jessica's Will, even though Jessica's Will has been in precons, like you don't have to worry that your Jessica's Will is too powerful because like
Yeah.
you know it is powerful. and
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
it's taking up one of the 3 slots in your deck.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if they're going to at some point say like one game changer. You know, in some of these decks that like
I wouldn't be surprised if like we got another bracket between 2 and 3 that had like one game changer.
and maybe some of the precons like fall into that category that have a game changer in it, or they're like or whatever. Because I think that would take out some of the weirdness around you know, it's been in a precon type discussion.
Because like one of the thing I think it was in the weekly MTG stream that they were talking about Soul Ring, and they were like, yeah, like obviously Soul Ring is a powerful card. Like obviously it should belong on the Game Changers list. But you know that every deck has Soul Ring in it. So it's there's nothing unexpected about that. And like to that degree, the same argument could be made for having one game changer in a deck. That it's like, yeah, like sure, your deck may have Force of Will, but everybody's deck has a card of that caliber potentially in it.
Well, yeah, and I think some of those cards like do scale with the power of a game too, right?
Yeah.
Like every time I've cast Jessica's Will in a precon game, it's like, wow, this card's crazy, and I cast like one more spell or something like that, right?
Yeah. You
And
don't hit too much good stuff off the top.
Yeah, right, exactly. And every time I see someone cast Jessica's Will in a CEDH game, they've won. You know what I mean? And so it's like it is just like a different. It's just different. Like they're different environments, and so having one, though, like that's probably not true for all of them. Like playing Ristic Study in a casual game or in a precon level game is like a different beast entirely.
I do think I'd probably prefer not to have a bracket where that has one game changer, just because if I go back to how Rachel Weeks broke down those 3 brackets, like Force of Will doesn't lend itself to a game that has like incremental telegraphed progression.
Yeah, fewer surprises. Like you expect, like you expect fewer surprises at that level. And I guess maybe not fewer surprises, but I like the telegraphed act. Like that's such a good description of how I would expect things to go.
And one thing that really changed my understanding of bracket 2 was that the command zone said that they thought most game nights decks were bracket 2, if not all game nights decks were bracket 2. And those are good decks. Like those are not precons.
No.
those are really powerful decks. But if you think about the purpose of game nights, like it is a production. It's for entertainment value. And so those games, to be interesting and fun to watch, need to have an arc. They need to have like a progression where it's like, oh, this deck grew this way, and then another deck grew over on top of it, and then this one had like a big pitfall. And there's a story there. There's a narrative there. Whereas if they were playing like bracket 3 or 4, well, a deck just like combos off in the late game and just like wins out of nowhere and wasn't part of that narrative. Like that is an interesting storytelling. And so having all of those decks be bracket 2 where they are like there's telegraphed gameplay where it's like you can see the progression, the linear progression of each deck, I think that like perfectly explains what bracket 2 is to me. Like I think that helps me a lot in understanding what that's supposed to look like. If we can ignore the precon language, which I think we can moving forward. Like even though they didn't make that update now, they said, yeah, that was probably a mistake and we're going to revise that.
Yeah, should we talk about that actually? I have the quote here from how they did that. So it was one of our critiques of bracket 2 was like we read the whole description, took out the precon language and was like, yeah, this is how we try to build our decks. We don't think precons belong here. And they have now said that they're trying to they feel like it was a mistake to try to hitch their wagon of bracket 2 to the precons. level, and they wanted to change that language a little bit. I'll read this quote here really quick. So they said, this is in the footnotes for why Seedborn Muse is on the Game Changers list.
Ooh, it's a hidden gem.
Yeah, exactly. So it's worth calling out here that yes, Seedborn Muse was just in the Abzan armor deck from Tarkir Dragonstorm. First, this deck was finalized long ago, before Commander Brackets existed. Second, I'll use this moment as a reminder that Core, Bracket 2, is on the level of an average modern-day pre-constructed Commander deck, but that doesn't mean that there can't be some variance there. We are looking at updating the terminology in the future to pull away from pre-constructed Commander decks as a benchmark, as we understand that has caused some confusion. We just want to be clear that we know about the collision with Tarkir Dragonstorm and want to avoid that seeming like a mixed message.
Cool. Awesome. Two thumbs up. I'm all for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one of our biggest critiques, was that we felt like either bracket 3 was very, very large, or that bracket 2 is very, very large, and there needed some room for decks that.
Yeah. And I do think that bracket 2 is very, very large. Like that was another thing that they mentioned in talking about bracket 2 on the command zone, was they felt like most people who think their decks are bracket 3, or at least a lot of people who think their decks are bracket 3, they're actually bracket 2. And there's just not clear enough delineations between those two.
Yeah, and to be frank, I think we do need to have clear delineations, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm also fine with like 60% of decks, like a standard deviation from the median or from the mean, like being in a single bracket, right? If that average is slicing bracket 2 and we kind of have a long tail going towards bracket 5, I think I'm okay with that. Preferably it would be smaller than like 60% of decks, right? But like,
yeah,
I'm fine with it being like
I just
plurality
want to pull
of decks being in a
precons out.
bracket. Yeah.
Like, let's just ignore precons. And if you want to play a precon game, it is so easy to communicate saying, hey, I want to play a precon game.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Everybody knows what that is. And someone might say, like, oh, I have a precon. I changed it like 5 cards. And you could be like, sure, I feel comfortable with that. You know, like, I don't know. I just think that, like, precon is already very communicable. Like, everybody knows what that means.
Yeah. Until the 5 cards I change out
mana drain.
I only made 5 swaps, but it was just Ristic Study Mana Drain.
The One Ring.
So, okay, so this kind of leads us into the future of the bracket system, as at least what we hope happens going forward, and also what they have communicated will be happening going forward. And part of that being they're gonna unhitch their wagon from bracket 2, and precons they're letting those hopefully be a little bit separate, or at least removing that terminology in the future. Historically, our critiques have been that we want to add cards to the Game Changers list. Check. I think that there's still room to grow there and moving cards to the Game Changer list, but I think on by and large they have done what we expected there. The next one being is that we want to add more functional brackets and potentially remove bracket 5, which is CDH, and bracket 1, which is Exhibition, off the scale, because
as
they
categories.
They're categories, right? They're not on the scale. They're individual categories. So let's talk about it. So they gave some indication of the direction they want to go, and I think we're happy with it, because part of that focus is now going to be around intent of deck building, right? That was something that they didn't hit the hammer on very hard in the first iteration, and they called that out as a mistake of theirs.
Yeah. Do you want me to read the quote about intent?
Yeah, actually, that would be awesome. Yeah.
So there was a section, I think, that was titled "Intent is the most important part of the bracket system." And the quote says, while there are guidelines to keep in mind when deck building, no game changers in Exhibition or Core, no mass land denial through upgrade, etc., the bracket system is emphatically not just put your deck into a calculator, get assigned a rank, and be ready to play. I deeply appreciate the tools the websites like Moxfield and Architect have put together to give you an overall estimate, and they've done some fantastic iteration to help emphasize intent as well. But I want to stress that any estimate is just an estimate. It's on you to use what you know to label your deck correctly.
100%. So this is part of why we feel hesitant to play Mana Drain in some of our decks is because what we know about mana drain is that it is exceptionally powerful, and the play pattern is stop your thing, waste your mana, now I have mana, right? Yeah. And so the two things that I think that we have talked about that really go into making a successful power level system are, rather than just having my and your experience of what we know to label our decks, is giving us shared objective points of reference for measuring the power level of our deck and for interpreting our intent, if that makes sense. So the Game Changers list like does part of that, right? It says
definitely
these are powerful cards. Use them sparingly because they will make your deck more powerful. And I think that's
it
part
sets
of
expectations for which types of cards you're going to see.
Yes.
In a game.
Yeah, exactly. And essentially shortcuts that needing to use what you know to label your deck correctly, because part of those will say, oh, this if you're playing these cards, it means your deck is like around, like will inevitably in a game, not every game, but in a game, play at this bracket, which is part of what our argument has been historically for power level outliers, right? Sure. Your deck won't always be a 3, but you're playing Ristic Study, so it will be a 3 in a game where you find Ristic Study.
Yes, definitely. And I do think that it's just not enough to just have the Game Changers. It's also not enough to have like the first graphic that they ever shared about the bracket system, where it was like no tutors, like no mass land and out. Like those checklists, even though those are very discreet and easy to understand, except for the language around like few.
Yeah, right.
But like the knowing that there's no mass land and out, like that's also not enough. And I think it does come down to intent. And what we've talked about on this channel for a long time is intent in deck building. And that really you're going to have a worse experience building a deck and then trying to find a bracket for it than just from conception of the deck. When you're building the deck, having a goal that you're building towards and having intent in your deck building and not just at the end once you've built it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be kind of complicated. Like, as we've demonstrated, we've built decks that we've thought, we're trying to build these at a lower power, and whoops, we think it's performing a little bit higher. And that is like the optimizers in us, right? Like, I'm avoiding these specific cards because I know they're very powerful, but I still want my deck to like do its thing effectively. And
Will it be easier now, though, with Game Changers?
I think so. I think because they've expanded the Game Changers list. Like, I built a Marchesa deck, or Dealer of Death. I took it apart because I wasn't playing it because I played it a couple times and didn't know how much I loved it. And it had Orcish Bowmasters in it. And because it was like a easy way to commit crimes, right? Like people draw a card.
Very efficient.
Very efficient, right? And I wasn't running like wheels or anything like that, so I didn't feel like I was trying to abuse Orcish Bowmasters. But I think the deck was performing maybe a little bit higher than I thought it was, than I had intended it to, by avoiding some cards. It also had a Jessica's Will in it because it targets.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And this was prior to the Game Changers list. Yep. And since the Game Changers list has come out and those have been put on there, it's helped me think, oh, I still think I actually want to play these cards in this deck. Let's just try to make it a 3, though I've still tried to adjust, like, how do I want to make this be not like a removal tribal deck, right? Like, I don't want this to be just like, oops all interaction or whatever, because I need to commit crimes. And I think it does take that pairing of objective reference points and then also understanding of, or intent of, where do I want this to be? What do I think will make this fun for me to play and for people to play against? From the beginning of deck building, to be able to build a deck at a given power level versus build a deck and slap a label on it and ship it.
Yeah, totally. And where this is coming out after people have already built a lot of decks, like, we're not saying that everybody should go and rebuild all of their decks and start over with intent in deck building. But take time to look at your deck with that intent and try and figure out where you want it to be. I think it's both like intent and desire, right? Like take a look at your deck through the lens of what do I want this deck to be, not what is this deck.
Yes.
I think those are like very different lenses, and I think it's important to ask yourself the prior question.
Yeah, because it's okay for you to want it to be high power. Just be honest with yourself about wanting it to be there and it doing that. And I think that's something I need to come to terms with a little bit more, is that I like building 3s. I actually don't like building 2s all that much because I feel like the constraints I have to put on myself to build a 2 are sometimes feel a little bit too constricting, and I think that's something that I've ended up landing on. But yeah, I think that's a, I don't know where I was going with that, except that I agree. That's to not, the difference is between, how did you phrase it? Say it one more time. It was
just where do you want this deck to be versus like where is it?
Where is it? Yeah. Exactly.
Anyways, I'm really happy with the changes. I'm really happy with the updates to the game changers list, though. Like I said, there's a few that I kind of roll my eyes at. I think they'll eventually fall off the game changers list. I know that a lot of people were worried about the size of the game changers list and were worried about increasing it more than 40. This is a 50% increase. Like this went from 40 to over 60. I don't know that I'm worried about it being too many, but also like I'm a fairly entrenched player and I think about this a lot. I'm not like buying my first precon and then I go to upgrade it and someone's like, that's a game changer. So like I this is going to be tough. This is going to be really tough for newer players or just people who just don't play that often, who like, play once a year with their cousins at a family reunion or something like that. Like this is going to be really rough. But for people who are deeply entrenched and playing a lot and thinking about it a lot, I think it's a great solution.
Yeah, for the avid player base, it'll be easy to keep track, or relatively easy to keep track of, I think.
Yeah.
I think when I think of me having looked into other formats and being like, wait, what's banned in this format? And scrolling through like a giant list from like Canadian Highlander or whatever and trying to understand what's banned, I think it could probably be overwhelming. But I do think it is moving to a good spot. And I think like it's not wholly unwieldy. Like
no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal, to be honest.
I bet that like at any given time this list probably stays between 50 and 75. Like cuz I could see them unbanning more stuff, or just like as new cards get printed, they're all going to go to the game changers list.
Yeah.
But I also foresee some of these coming off.
Yeah, I think so too. I think before we go, I think the last thing I wanted to say is that I'm actually like very, very impressed with the Commander Format Committee judges of Magic the Gathering Commander. I don't know what the name of this team is called. I'm very impressed with how much they have listened to the community on this. Like, I know they said they were going to and they were planning to, but I'm like super stoked with how much they had. We had someone from the committee comment on one of our videos because they were actively out looking in the community for feedback. on the system. They're not just like sitting in a tower, like in their ivory tower, just slashing cards off of the ban list and moving.
No, that was huge. Shout out to Tim. Thanks for checking out our stuff.
Huge shout out.
I also just want to say like huge shout out to Gavin, and I don't know if he's got a team that's like working with him on stewarding the format or if it's mostly just him, but as far as I've heard the format panel talk about it, it's really like Gavin and his team that's making the decisions. Like they'll be brought in to have conversations to be like, what do you think about this? What is your input on this? What is your input on this? But like they don't actually make the decisions as a panel. Like in the end, like they don't know what the decision is or what it's going to be. It's actually just like Gavin taking all that input and then like making the decision. So like, yeah, thumbs up. Go Gavin. You're crushing it.
Way to go. That's awesome. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Gavin,
cool.
You're killing it. Unban balance.
And everything else while you're at it.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for joining us. We're stoked to be back, to have Keltson back, to be able to record a little bit more. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe. Join our Discord. People are having lots of great conversations there and catching games every once in a while. And until next time, remember to always pay the one.